This morning we have the pleasure of welcoming Father Seraphim from Scotland. Father Seraphim was born and raised in Romania and did PhD work in Oxford in England and just kind of stayed around, I guess. And now is founding a monastery there with both a men's group in a home there, 3 monks, men, and then 3 nuns, a couple hours away, and then kind of another part of the same island they're on. And anyway, it's a pleasure to have you, Father.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. I do come from a tiny island, but that's not really important. What is important that I should begin today by telling you how happy I am on your behalf. I understand this is a new home for you, and this is such a beautiful home. This is such a beautiful home. God gave you such a beautiful gift. But keep in mind, and this is the one thing I want to tell you about yourselves, keep in mind that if God gave you the tools, He expects you to use them. So His part is more or less done, at least in the visible way. Now you have to do the work, and now you have to make sure that your community flourishes. You have to make sure that you support your priests, you support your deacons, you support each other, and that you become a real community, a sort of a family. Because a building, at the end of the day, is just a building. And the people from whom you have received this building had it before you, and it didn't quite serve them right if they ended up giving them over to you, the building and everything. So be aware that gifts from God come with responsibilities and with a lot of work after you've received them. And it was the same for us. In 2009 or 2010, if I remember correctly, I was given an abandoned church on an island in the northwest of Scotland. And I thought, I'm done. I'm going to go there and be a hermit and live the life I've always wanted to live. And 10 years later, I'm in Arizona in order to meet people and to tell you about our community and our monastery and our saints and to get your support. So be very, very careful with what you were given, because it does come with responsibility, and you are going to be asked about what you've achieved, what you have done with the gifts He gave you. I won't keep you very long, because I'm very bad at keeping time. I have an approximation of about 15 minutes from Father, and I imagine half of it has gone already. That's how bad I am. But I want to tell you a few words about this particular Sunday. First of all, because I happen to be here, but secondly, because I genuinely love this Sunday. It is the Sunday of Orthodoxy, or the Sunday of the Holy Icons. And I personally have found my way into the church, coming from a communist background with a non-practicing family. I found my way back through icons. And to this day, icons have been the main source of teaching for me. You may look at an icon and think, well, what's the big deal about an icon? But the church does see a great deal in them. And the main proof is that the first Sunday of this most important fasting period is dedicated to them. There is, of course, the theology of the icon. We need the icon in order to preach to the world the truth of the incarnation of Christ. Never forget that basic theology of the icon. We have to paint icons. We have to venerate icons, simply because if we say that icons cannot be painted, then we say that Christ's incarnation was not real. If Christ's body cannot be painted, that means that His body, His flesh, was somehow different from mine or from yours. Because our bodies, our flesh, can be touched, can be seen, can be represented. And if our flesh can be painted and represented in a visual way, so can Christ's. To say otherwise is to say that his flesh was not our flesh, and therefore simply deny the reality of the incarnation, or to make it into something else that it really wasn't. We believe that Christ became incarnate. We believe that he was born from the Holy Virgin, taking the same flesh that each of us have today. And the best way to make that point to this world is to keep on painting our icons and to keep on venerating not the actual paint or the actual wood, but him who is represented in those icons. This is the basic, the primary theology of the icon. And it's something each of you should know and always remember before any other justification. When people ask you, this is the main thing. We believe in the reality of the incarnation, and therefore we believe that his flesh was real human flesh and could be painted. But there is more to an icon than just a statement of theology. And a hint of that more you've seen and heard in the gospel which was read, which is a very simple, almost seemingly random reading from the gospel. You have Christ recognizing a human being and a human being recognizing Christ. And this reading is placed before us at this Sunday of the Holy Icons to just guide us through the whole of Lent. And the reason for that is that there's nothing else we can hope to receive following Lent except the ability to recognize Christ in everyone and in everything, and the hope that in the resurrection, on Pascha night, and at the real resurrection, Christ will also recognize us. There's nothing really more to pray for, or to hope for, or to live for. Have you seen how when Father James goes about, or the deacon goes about and senses the icons, after he senses, of course, the Holy of Holies, the altar, and then he comes out and senses the icons, and then he does this extraordinary thing where he begins to sense you in the same way, with the same prayers, with the same interior approach. He senses you and he senses the icons. And that is not an accident, and it's not something that happens just because he has to get from the altar to the end of the church. That happens because you and I and the entire humankind are also icons. And in fact, we are much better quality icons than the ones that are painted on wood. But it is easier for us to look at that icon, a piece of wood on which we paint Christ, and to say, yes, that is an image of Christ. I can see Christ, I can recognize him. But when you look at me, that may be more difficult. And when you look at people who do not share the same values as you do, that is even more difficult. When you look at people who do not share your faith, that becomes almost impossible. When you look at people who live a sinful lives and think that the sinful life they live is in fact the life, that is even more difficult. But the reality is that each and every one of us, we have been created by the same God and for the same reason, in order to be saved. And the reality also is that in each of us, every single person, from Adam until the last man or woman God will create before the end of the world, each of us is imprinted with the divine image of Christ. And if we have something to learn from the way in which we venerate the icons, if we have something to learn during these 40 days of fasting, is this very simple but essential for our salvation idea that you have to look at the world and see beyond the darkness. You have to look at the world and see beyond the sins of the world. You have to look beyond the lack of faith, the lack of goodness, and try to always recognize that spark of divinity that exists in every single human being who is alive. Because men or women, black or white or purple or whatever, if you love men or if you love women, or if you are a monk and you don't marry, or you love goats or you love whatever you love, whatever you do, whatever you are, whatever you look like, you are created by the same Creator, and we are brothers and sisters in that sense. And if we fail to relate to one another based on His commandments, which are only love each other as you love yourself, then we failed everything. A Christian life is not about coming to church. A Christian life is not about fasting. A Christian life is not about praying. All these things are tools. Like this building you were given, they are merely tools for you to use in order to feed in yourselves the only thing which is necessary. Love your neighbor as yourself. And who is a neighbor? Well, look in the gospel. The neighbor is the one who is fallen down, being taken down by the enemy. And who is our enemy? The devil. The more you see someone struggling, the further away from Christ you see that someone is, the more you are responsible, the greater your responsibility towards that particular person. If you have a virtuous person on your left hand and you have a sinful person on your right hand, your instinct should be to pray for the sinner. Your instinct should be to reach out to the sinner. Your instinct should be to lift up the sinner, because the virtuous one can take care of himself or of herself. The basic lesson of an icon is to teach us that our brothers and our sisters, regardless of what they look like, they carry within their souls the imprint of the divine image. And if we fail to relate to one another as a divine image to another divine image, then we have failed everything. And the great risk is that we may end up being institutionally perfectly correct Christians, but inside, not Christians at all. Christianity, and I will finish on this one because I have a feeling I've gone over 15 minutes. But I have to, if I traveled over one continent and one ocean to be with you for 10 minutes, I don't care if you like me or not. I don't care if you agree with me or not. I trust God will take care of me and of the monastery. I come before you with the responsibility. I want you to go into the world. I have the responsibility to share with you what God put into my soul. And you have the responsibility to share this loving Christ with the world. Christianity is not a nice, civilized, socially up religion. Christianity becomes itself, becomes its true self only on the cross. And there is nothing hygienic or pleasant or socially acceptable about a man or a woman on a cross. And you know you are on the cross when your hearts are in pain for your brothers and your sisters who are far away from Christ. Because if they are far away from Christ, they are far away from life. If you feel content and comfortable and happy within your little parish, within your little Orthodox sect, then you have reduced something that should infest the world, infect the world, whatever the word is, to something that is already dead. You should be in pain for those who do not know Christ, not judging them, because judgment doesn't bring life, but praying for them and adding fasting for them and adding anything that you can do, from vigil prayer to prostrations to being kind, to being generous for them, because your calling is not to be a nice citizen on your Sunday best going to church. Your calling as a true Orthodox Christian is to be the mad saints of the world. And if we fail on that, we failed on everything. Thank you for having me, and thank you for the love I feel. Pray for me, pray for our small community, and may God help you grow here beyond your wildest hopes, and in a way that is meaningful and transformative for the world, whether you see it or not. May God bless us.